Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm joined by the very talented Meg Gadsby, who over the past few years has been taking a bunch of major titles, including a stunning win as a first-year uni student at BUCS cross country. In this episode, she'll talk through her training setup, running journey so far, and thoughts on having a strong mindset. There's definitely a lot that can be learned from her, and there's a reason why she's having so much success. And before we get into it, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast and you're happy to show your support for the show and you've been enjoying it, then please leave a rating and review. This really helps let me know what you guys like and helps the podcast out too. Okay, let's get into it. Meg, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Did you have a nice run this morning?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had a solo run, but it was quite nice. Yeah, nice day.
Are you normally one for a group run on Sundays?
I think it depends. I think if it's after a race, it's quite nice to do like a group run. But I don't mind doing solo sessions and solo runs.
Yeah. How far was it today then?
Today was 90 minutes.
Ooh,
Yeah.
pretty long.
Yeah, and then in summer, so 90 minutes is like the winter long run, and then in summer it cuts down. So we're just transitioning at the moment.
Yeah. And can you introduce yourself as a runner?
Yes, so I started running, I think I was top year under 17, bottom year under 17. So it's quite late. And yeah, I started running with my club back at home. And then I came to St Mary's for uni. And kind of, yeah, that's when I really started to think about running seriously.
Yeah, definitely. And, clearly made a difference because you came bursting
Yeah.
onto the scene. It was first year for uni that you won BUCS, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an incredible race for sure. Okay. So, let's start at the beginning. You mentioned they're coming quite late to the sport, and that definitely is, pretty late. How did you kind of find your way to running, and did you do any sports previously?
Yeah, I did quite a lot of sports kind of growing up. Like kind of dabbled in a bit of everything, like just school sports, after school clubs. And then it was actually like my PE teacher who kind of saw me running and said, "Oh, you should go to like the local running club." So I did. And then it was kind of just from there.
Well, no, that's so cool to hear, and thank goodness for that PE teacher. And so I'm guessing based on that then that you didn't come from a family running background. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's right. So my both my parents were quite sporty and stuff growing up, but they were never like highly competitive with what they did, which I think helped me kind of with my running because although they've been involved, they don't really understand to a certain extent. Like they'll obviously listen to kind of what I've ran, the times and the positions that I finished, and like say well done, but they don't really know what that actually means. So I don't ever feel like there's any pressure on me, which is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess as well must have stayed clear of kind of overdoing it at a younger age, potentially.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because if anything, when I would go out on a run, even when I go home for like holidays now, I'll tell my parents what I'm doing and they kind of say, okay, like just be careful with what you're doing though. Whereas I feel like some people's parents, if they're really involved, could be like, oh no, you need to be doing this, this, and this. Whereas my parents have never done that, which is quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. It's so key to have that balance and, people around you who sometimes can just bring you back down to earth when things are getting a bit out of control and stuff. So, no, that's great to hear. And so in terms of, again, coming a bit later to the sport, I think sometimes it can be a bit beneficial to get in a bit later or at least start taking it seriously a bit later on in terms of not overdoing it, maybe developing different muscles. Would you say that overall you think it's been a benefit to you, or are there any things that you think you've missed out on because of it?
I think for me, it's definitely been beneficial. Like, I'd say I was top year under 17, and my friends going to races would be talking about who was the favourite to win. And I'd never even heard of these names because obviously I just started running. So it was quite good because I felt like there wasn't really any pressure like in under 17s.
Yeah, definitely. Is that something that you'd say's changed a bit maybe as you've got more success?
I think I'm definitely like more aware of other runners on the scene, but I think because I did join later, I never really compared myself to like the more successful people at the start. So I kind of just focus on myself and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into that journey, to uni, the changes that maybe you made in terms of running. So what led you to choose St Mary's in the first place?
Definitely the running. Like I knew when I came to uni, that's when I wanted to like up my running and stuff and see really how far I could get. So I was looking at like the main running unis and then came to have a look at St Mary's and I had a look at the course as well. I'm doing physio, and I really liked it. So yeah, I picked this one.
Yeah, nice. Oh, that's great to hear. And you mentioned they're doing physio. Do you think that's helped a little bit with maybe the recovery side of training in any way?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like I think just comparing to what I thought about recovery before, kind of, well, I just didn't really think about it. You just did your session, you got home, and that was it.
Yeah.
But yes, since coming to uni and like learning more about the science behind it and stuff has really helped just kind of, I don't know, like signify the importance of actually recovering properly.
Yeah, definitely. And have you got a couple of maybe go-to recovery things that are a bit of essentials for you?
I think just after a session, like actually cooling down, it sounds kind of silly, but I think when I was back at home, I'd kind of cut my cool down short because I'd be so tired or, my legs would be tired. But yeah, then I'd always find the next day I'd be paying the price. So I think actually doing like a cool down jog properly, and just like having a proper meal after. And I don't know, I always have chocolate milk as well.
Oh, another chocolate milk one.
Yeah.
Classic runner food there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your training setup look like now? Having come to uni, you've been there 2 years
hmm
now. And, what key changes would you say you've kind of made in the past few years?
Yeah, so I think since coming to uni, just the types of sessions I do. So they didn't change that much from what I was doing before uni, but they just got gradually longer. Obviously, as I got older, like the volume and intensity kind of upped a bit. Yeah, so just making my long runs longer, and including a tempo as well. I've found that's really helped.
Oh, nice. Yeah, tempos seem to be becoming quite popular.
Yeah.
What's your views on them? Are you a fan?
I never actually tempoed like ever before uni. And then I remember the first session I did after it, I was like, I never want to do this again. That was so hard. But I think you kind of get used to it. And yeah, I do quite like tempo sessions now.
Oh, okay, join the dark side.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through, maybe your weekly training routine and maybe some of your favorite sessions?
Yeah. So I do 3 steady runs a week. I do 2 steady runs a week, then one long run and 3 sessions a week. So my sessions are kind of split up into on the Tuesday we go and track. I just do some like longer track work at the moment. And then as we go through the summer, that will get like shorter and quicker. And then Thursday is a grass session. So that's like shorter reps, just working on speed and stuff. And then Saturday is our tempo session.
Okay, nice. That's interesting. I feel like some people are moving more towards only 2-day sessions now. So it's nice to
Yeah,
see kind of a bit of variety in there.
yeah, definitely. And I think the variety of the sessions really help as well. Because obviously you don't want to be doing the same thing every day.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you branch out to cross training at all or strength and conditioning?
Yeah, actually, before like I said again, before uni, I would never go to the gym ever, and I would never even think of cross training. So if I had a niggle, I went to my coach back home. It would just be like a day off or a couple of days off. Whereas now, obviously, you go on the bike, go on the cross trainer, which I think is quite nice because if you're used to doing something kind of every day, and then suddenly you're told you can't do anything, it's quite difficult, especially if you come to uni kind of to do that sport. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, with the gym as well, that's definitely something like I've incorporated since starting uni. So I do 2 strength and conditioning sessions a week, which has definitely helped as well.
Yeah. Have you been someone who's suffered with a lot of injuries or have you kind of managed to stay clear of that side of things?
Yeah, I'd say I've kind of managed to stay clear, touch wood, that
We'll
yeah,
touch it all.
it stays that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because I obviously came into the sport a little bit later. So I didn't have that demand on my body for kind of as long as some other people. But yeah, at the moment, I've been able to stay quite injury free, which is
No, that's so great to hear. And yeah, that's really interesting point you made there. Perhaps coming later to the sport being a factor in not getting so wrapped up in that side of things. Would you say that you ever felt any pressure from, body image, or did you ever end up dealing with something like Red S, or coming later to the sport? Did you sort of manage to stay clear of that?
I think I've managed to stay clear of that. Obviously, you do see kind of things on social media and stuff. But yeah, I think because I was a little bit older and I wasn't like so involved in kind of who was at the top running and who was doing what, I kind of just focused on myself. Yeah, I've managed to stay clear of that. But I think now people are starting to talk about like reds a little bit more often. It's helping as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so, having come a bit later to the sport, maybe not having had so much of an intense training load at a younger age, do you think that's kind of meant that you've been able to maintain your enjoyment for the sport, or has motivation been a struggle for you at any point?
I think, yeah, because I came a little bit later, motivation has kind of always been there, which is definitely a good thing. Obviously, I don't know, like when it's winter and if I have to wake up early for a run and it's raining and really dark outside, nobody's going to want to do that. So I just think like having the discipline as well as the motivation helps. But yeah, motivation has been okay, I would say, and I think that is because I came a bit later.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Okay, so let's jump into some of your success. You've been, just trending upwards in terms of success over the last few years. Let's start with, some of your recent races. You've kind of done a couple of 10Ks, some 10,000s on track at BUCS. A lot of people are quite curious about stepping up to the longer distances at the moment. And I mean, your 10K was incredible, a 33:50. Talk us through that experience. Were you expecting it?
So when I ran 33:50, that was on the road and that was my first ever 10K. I've only done two. But no, I wasn't expecting it at all. I spoke to my coach, I think the night before the race, just to talk about how I was going to run it. And in races, I try not to look at my watch too much for pacing, just because I think if I was off pace, that would throw me off a bit. So I kind of just run just however I'm feeling. But yeah, so I kind of just sat in a pack, kept with a few people I knew, like in a little group, and just went from there, just making sure I didn't go off too hard at the start. Like that would just be so hard to have gone off too hard at the start and then have to maintain that for another, say, 6K or something.
Yeah, that definitely wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
Do you think 10K is something you would be looking to do more of?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I've done a road 10K and then one on the track as well, which was BUCS. And I think they are both really like mentally challenging races. And because I've only done two, I definitely like to do a couple of more just to see like how it progresses. I think obviously the more you do something, the better you can get at it.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the kind of mental strength required to not go insane during the race, what would you say you did? And, how did that process work for you?
I think kind of as much as you can, just zone out for the first however long. I think it's a bit easier on road, because obviously you can look at your surroundings, whereas on a track you're just doing laps and laps. But yeah, I think if you're doing a track 10K, just kind of switch off for the first 10 laps, say, and try and stick in the group. And then as people tend to like wind up the pace, go with them if you can.
Yeah, for sure. And would you say there was anything you did specifically in terms of training that, maybe you think enabled you to run such a good time?
I didn't actually change my training that much, like leading up to the 10Ks. So I think just having consistency is a big thing for a lot of people. But I think especially me, like if I'm on the start line and I know I've had a couple of weeks of good consistent training, that really helps as well, just with mindset.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so, in terms of, let's talk about this season so far. You're second at the National, you won the Southerns, that's National Cross Country and South of England Cross Country Championships for anyone who's not sure. What's been your favourite race? Have you got a highlight of the season?
Ooh, I think That's a good question. I think a highlight was probably the Southerns, so the south of England, um, because yeah, at Christmas time, I wasn't completely running. I was more like running and on the bike and just managing a niggle that I had. So then to come back and be able to do that, I had no idea that I could do that. I thought top five would be good. So to go and win it was really good for like my confidence as well.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. So you mentioned they're having a bit of a niggle and being on the bike. I
Mhm.
guess you must have done something right on the bike. What did training look like and what niggle did you have?
So the niggle was I don't know what it actually was. I never got like diagnosed with anything. But I just had a bit of lower back pain like going into my quad. So I kind of thought it's probably best not to run through it because if it's hurting, something's clearly wrong. So yeah, over Christmas, I think I had 2 weeks off running completely, which looking back doesn't even sound like a long time, but during that time, it just felt like the longest and it just really dragged. But yeah, kind of just did everything on the bike. So bike sessions, just bike spins, just to kind of keep some fitness up for when I came back, be able to run
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's so key how you mentioned there it feeling so long. It really is so hard, when you're a bit injured or you've got a niggle. And it's easy for people to kind of forget what a dark time that can definitely be.
Definitely.
So
And I think when you're used to kind of running, say, every day, or you've got a routine, you kind of run in the morning or you do a session, and then being told that you can't do that and you just have to, the only thing you can do is kind of, even though obviously that's good that you can still do something, it's just not the same time.
yeah, for sure, 100%. And looking back on it, is there anything that you would have changed during, that time?
I don't think so. I think if I do have a niggle or I am injured or something, or for whatever reason I have to go on the bike, I think kind of just remembering that it's only going to be a couple of weeks or it's only going to be however long and you will get back to being even fitter than you were before and like racing to how you were before. So I think yeah, just trying to use whatever strategy you need to just kind of keep your motivation up.
Yeah, definitely. Some very wise words there, guys. And so, for anyone who's maybe, unfortunately in the position of being on the bike at the moment, have you got a key session that you would recommend?
I think just kind of yeah, a bit of a fartlek on the bike, I guess, just a mixture of different length reps, just to, you know, keep the legs moving, I guess.
Have you got any specific times you can dish out?
Um, Maybe a few 6 minutes, as horrible as they are. Like a 7.5 minute, maybe some 2 minutes.
Pushing it to
Yeah,
sound more
just a bit of
manageable.
everything. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And so, you chose that over your, strong performance at the national. Was that primarily just because of it being unexpected, or was there anything else in there?
Yeah, I think that was just because obviously coming off the back of not running over Christmas, in my head I kind of wanted to get like top five, top seven, I would have been really happy with. And I was just happy with kind of how I ran the race. So there was a group of us, and then I was feeling really strong coming up this. There was this massive hill around the back corner, and I was feeling quite strong going into that. And I could tell the people around me were starting to struggle a little bit. So I just
Yeah.
pushed on then. So yeah, I was just happy with how I ran it, I think.
Yeah. Do you prefer cross country or road or track?
I think if I had to choose an order, it would go cross country, road, then track. But I do like all of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean that, it's clear, you've got a strong, I was going to say track record, but maybe we should be saying cross record as well here. A strong record in, doing well at championships and performing well in races. What's your kind of strategy going into, a big race?
I think, yeah, if I know I've got a big race coming up, I think just knowing obviously everyone's there kind of to run well. And instead of putting pressure on yourself, just use it as an opportunity to kind of show what you've been doing in training and kind of how your training can pay off. So yeah, I think just instead of looking at it from like a pressurizing perspective, which is so easy to get wrapped up into, just looking at it as more of an opportunity to like kind of showcase what you can do.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's great advice there. And in terms of, when you're in the race, do you go into a race with a plan? Do you kind of see where things go?
I think it definitely depends on the race, and like if you know who's going to be in the race, you kind of tailor it to how you're going to run. But yeah, I try and always have a chat with my coach like a few days before a race, just so we can talk about a race plan. Um, and then I kind of just listen to what he says and run it like that.
Yeah. And I think one race that, a lot of people who are probably listening to this or who run in general will be aware of is your win at BUCS. I guess, firstly, could you say that was sort of a bit of a breakthrough into launching you to the top of the sport?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Just because, again, it was so unexpected and I didn't put any pressure on myself. It was my first BUCS. I didn't really know what to expect. Obviously, before uni, you have English schools, but I'd never really done very well in English schools. I think my highest finish was maybe like 40 something. So yeah, then to do BUCS and kind of do what I did was completely unexpected. So yeah, definitely a bit of a breakthrough.
Do you think it was not having too much pressure on yourself that allowed you to do well? Or, what was your thought process going through that race?
Yeah, I think kind of leading up to it, I just thought we'll just see what happens. Obviously, I was kind of in the B race, so the shorter race. Just see what happens and just enjoy the day. Kind of at uni, we were more told it was like the experience, and it's more of like a team event, which obviously in cross country you don't really have. So kind of, I just wanted to enjoy the atmosphere. So then I wasn't really focusing on like how I was going to do race wise. I just wanted to enjoy being part of the team.
Yeah, no, that's such a great mindset to have. And how did this year's BUCS compare to last year's? A bit of a longer
I
course.
think, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was really interesting to kind of see the difference in courses. So in my first year, it was really, really thick mud. But then this year it was quite a flat, fast course. So I think it definitely appealed a bit more to the track runners. And obviously this year was longer. So before the 10Ks, that was the longest race I'd done. So I was quite happy with how I like managed to maintain that throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, you finished an incredible 12th. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. An incredible 12th there. So, I think you got a lot to be happy with.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of, racing in general, are you someone who has a specific pre-race routine or post-race routine?
I think I used to more than I do now. And I think that's mainly just because if for whatever reason I can't like replicate that pre-race routine, then obviously I don't want that to kind of affect how I'm going to race. So I just try not to really think about the race until the day.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. And so you seem like someone who's got, a good head on your shoulders, positive mindset. How do you cope with a bad race?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think kind of obviously nobody wants to have a bad race. Um, and it is like it can be quite upsetting or like disheartening if you do have a bad race, especially if it was kind of the bigger one that you wanted to like show what you can do. So I think just dealing with it is I kind of have this rule where obviously I can be annoyed at myself or upset or however I want to feel for that day, but then when it's the next morning, like even if you're still annoyed, you just have to kind of draw a line under it and start afresh because I guess the bad race happened and you just need to know that that doesn't replicate where you are in training or replicate what you can do. So I think just having the patience that, the race you need to have will come,
Yeah.
basically.
Amazing. Yeah, lovely stuff there. And for anyone who's maybe struggling to draw that line, do you have any kind of tips or things you do to move on even when it's tough?
Yeah, I think kind of obviously if you've had a race the day before and you've got a run the next day, nobody really wants to just because they're annoyed and still in their headspace. So I think if you can just do a steady run instead of maybe a session, just do something that you actually enjoy, and kind of just like, remember why you run, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of like putting pressure on yourself, because if you're in a bad mindset, you're not going to be able to train well. Well, I can't anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that goes for the majority of people.
Yeah.
And so, you've clearly got a lot of good strategies in place. In terms of training, sometimes people get a bit stressed or nervous before a session because they've put so much pressure on themselves to reach certain times or something like that. What does that situation look like for you? Are you someone who struggles with that, or do you have any strategies?
I think I have before, and I think when you kind of move to a new environment or you're training with a new group, there's obviously this pressure that you can even just set on yourself. You want to impress the coach, you want to impress the other athletes there. But I think kind of instead of using it as, oh, I need to hit this time for this rep, kind of just thinking, okay, everyone's here to train, everyone's here to work hard. Let's just work as a group instead of trying to work individually. So just sitting in that group and just going from there, really.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And when you say kind of sitting in there and, not overdoing it, would you say that in terms of training effort, you're someone who has a sensible approach to the intensity that you're outputting in sessions?
I think it depends on the session. I think I'd rather kind of start a session maybe a little bit more reserved, I guess, just to make sure that I can finish it strong. But I don't know, for me, a goal is never to finish a session, like not being able to walk because I'm so fatigued. Obviously, I think there's just finding that fine line between, pushing hard enough but not pushing too hard, which I think people can struggle with. But yeah, you just have to go with how you feel, really.
Yeah, no, definitely some, great advice there as well. Are you someone who pays any attention to kind of stats and data and that type of stuff, or are you very much a run on feel?
I think it's more a run on feel. So for steadies, like I'll look at my watch to kind of see what pace I'm going. But if I see that I'm going slower than I normally am, I'm not going to then suddenly pick it up because if I'm going slower, I'm obviously tired that day, so I don't want to push it on too much. And I'd rather save kind of the higher intensity stuff for sessions. That's what it's meant for.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Do you have a favorite session?
I quite like I quite like grass sessions, which are just split into a bit of everything. So you've got some 2 minutes, some 3 minutes, some like quick stuff, so like 60 seconds. I think, yeah, just varied session really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, nice stuff there. Grass sessions definitely are the best.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. If you kind of look back over, how you've done so far, what would you say, the main things that you think have enabled you to kind of have longevity and success with that?
I think just definitely gradually building up like what you're doing, your weekly mileage. So when you first come to uni, for example, you see everyone else doing however many miles per week, and you kind of want to jump up straight to that. But I think just having the patience and just being sensible, knowing realistically, if you do that, you are going to get injured. And I think for me, it's definitely been like, okay, I'd rather this success or kind of this running story, I guess, last a little bit longer. So I'd rather it take longer to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Patience is definitely so key. And
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned there being sensible and making sure, you take rests and stuff like that when needed. Have you ever had any situations where you've maybe not sessioned or held back a bit, maybe on feeling a bit of a niggle coming on or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I'm feeling, I don't know, say if it's winter and there's this cold going around, I will still try and session, but ultimately, if I'm really struggling to breathe in that session, then I won't kind of do the whole thing that maybe I set. Maybe I cut a few reps out after having spoken to my coach, just because I don't want to do the full session and then not be able to run for the rest of the week because I'm ill.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a key one there. And then is there anything that you would change looking back?
I don't know actually, because I think when I was back home, I kind of was looking at like through my stats and stuff the other day from like years ago, and my studies used to be a lot slower than they were now. But then I think if I was to have changed that now, would it still be the same? I feel like I'm not making sense. Hang on, let me word this properly. yeah, so I was looking at my stats the other week from like my sessions back at home and my studies back at home, and they were a lot slower then. But I think if I was to have picked them up then, would I still have progressed in the same way, or would I have got injured, if you know what I mean? So I think, yeah, so I think just keeping everything how it was actually. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, well, it's clearly worked. I mean, it is quite rare to have got to this level without having ended up with any sort of injuries or major red S
Mhm.
situations and stuff like that. Do you think, what are your thoughts on the kind of topic of, say, red S in particular? Is that's really, popular at the moment?
Mhm. Yeah. No, I definitely think it's something really important to talk about. And I have spoken to my coach about it a couple of times just because obviously upping the intensity and upping the volume of your training, you need to also make sure like you're upping your kind of food intake and just for me, like making sure I'm like taking my vitamins every day and stuff. So I think definitely more people talking about it is obviously helping all athletes, kind of younger and older.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's really great that you mentioned they're having those conversations with your coach. And are there any things in particular that maybe have surprised you or that you've made a conscious effort to do to make sure that you kind of avoid ending up in a state of say, reds?
Mm-hmm. I think definitely just as I gradually kind of increase my volume of training, just making sure that I am still eating enough to kind of fuel that. Obviously, when I was back home, I was running kind of less, so I wasn't kind of eating as much. But if I was to eat the same amount as I was when I was back home with the mileage that I'm doing now, obviously that wouldn't kind of balance itself out. So yeah, just being sensible and kind of even if you're not that hungry after a session, just making sure you have something and then maybe having a bigger meal later.
Yeah, absolutely. Key stuff there. Do you have a favorite, go to post session, post training, post race snack meal?
Probably if it's post race, probably like some fast food on the way home or something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, time is of the essence when it comes to refueling, so gonna make it fast.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we've touched a bit on how maybe you've managed to stay clear of, say, red S and stuff like that. Another common issue that a lot of women face is, periods and stuff. For you, have periods been a problem?
I think at the moment, no, they're kind of I just track them normally, just to make sure that I am having kind of regular cycles. And it's something that kind of my coach checks on as well, which I think is quite good.
Mhm.
But maybe when I was a bit younger, they were a little bit more irregular.
Yeah. Do you get any kind of symptoms or anything that makes running worse for you or
I think kind of in the week leading up to my cycle, I just feel a bit groggy and tired. So training when I'm feeling like that can be quite difficult. But I think just kind of cutting yourself some slack, obviously not too much, but just being aware that what's happening in your body and what's happening to your body, um, and kind of the reason you're feeling like this.
yeah, definitely. Listening to the body is so key. Okay, and so something else that, I think would be really interesting to touch on here is, you're studying physio and I correct me if I'm wrong, but am I right in thinking that course involves quite a heavy placement studying kind of situation? So how have you balanced that alongside running and, you mentioned earlier increasing the mileage and stuff as well?
Yeah, so I'm on placement at the moment, and kind of how it works at St Mary's is you can be placed kind of anywhere around London. So I'm on my second placement of the year. This one isn't kind of as bad as the first one. This one's on campus, whereas my last one was kind of in central London.
Yeah. And is that all day, every day, or
Yeah, so it's all day, Monday to Friday. So I think in total it's like 37.5 hours a week. So it's like a full-time job basically. So at the start it was definitely quite hard to balance with training, because I'd leave kind of when it was still dark outside, come back, it's dark, and then I'd have to run. So it was quite difficult. But I think just knowing that it's better than kind of doing nothing. And I quite enjoyed training after a long day, even though I was tired. But obviously, just because I enjoy running, so it didn't seem as much of a chore because I actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Would you say you made any kind of adjustments to what you were expecting from yourself during that time?
Yeah, I think so. Kind of. So when I'd come back from placement, I would be doing like solo runs and solo sessions. So just not being as harsh on yourself if you're running a little bit slower in your reps or in your steady runs, just because obviously you've had quite a full on week. And as the weeks build up, you kind of get a little bit more tired. And obviously doing it by yourself, it's a lot harder to kind of push to get those times that maybe you wanted.
Yeah. Did you find that you were often having to train alone, or were there any chances for you to join in the group at any point?
So yeah, normally it would kind of be by myself. But there's a few occasions where there's been like other students who have had to train in the evening. So we'd kind of do a session together, which even if it's just you and one other person really helps, because obviously you take it in turns to kind of take the reps.
Yeah, for sure. And if you had to give a piece of advice to someone who's, doing a placement or struggling to kind of balance uni with running, what would you say to them?
I think kind of just plan out the week if you can, think what days are going to be most suitable for your session days. When are you going to fit your steady runs in? Are you going to be able to do it before or can you do it after? So kind of just, yeah, having a bit of planning going on.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and so, moving forwards, you've had loads of incredible performances, lots of success. What's the plan? What's the agenda for this track season?
Yeah, so for this track season, I think just do a few more longer races because I've been quite enjoying kind of something a little bit different. And then maybe towards the end of track season, drop it down again to do some shorter races once I've done a little bit more speed work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think just kind of building a good base towards the end of track season for the upcoming cross season too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is your track season in part kind of there to support a better cross country season, or are you just as invested in track?
I think it's a bit of both. I think because cross will always be kind of my preferred and my favorite. When I'm like doing my sessions, I'm always thinking, okay, this will also help my cross country season. So just having that in the back of my head, but then equally just being excited to be able to run a bit quicker over track as well.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to see kind of the times drop down and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And is the European something that you're, hoping to maybe target this summer?
Yeah, I've definitely spoken about it and thought about it. And I think kind of just see what happens really. I don't want to put any pressure on myself. So kind of just make sure that I'm enjoying training and keeping consistent, and just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, these things will come with time. And if you were to, target them, what event would that be for?
So I think probably either the 5 or 10,000, just see how it goes really.
Yeah. So I'm guessing then that European cross is definitely an aim for next cross country season.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm working towards, but also not being too hard on myself because I'm not going to be an under 20 anymore. So obviously there's a whole new ball game there. So kind of just enjoying the experience of being around some of the older athletes and the more experienced ones and
Yeah,
just
no.
learning a lot really.
Yeah, great mindset as usual. Do you have any kind of long-term plans with running? Do you know yet, or just kind of taking it as it comes?
Yeah, I think kind of just taking it as it comes. Obviously, everyone wants to see kind of how far they can go. So I think just seeing what I can do over the next couple of years, hopefully staying around the Twickenham area in St Mary's as well. Just because I quite like it here. There's loads of really nice places to run, and it keeps me quite focused, which is good.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. if we move on to, some quick fire questions to wrap up with, or maybe not so quick as they sometimes are, do you have do you have a go-to like running mantra or, key phrase?
Yeah, I think in races it's kind of just this will be over soon. Like obviously I think every athlete's had it in a race where they're really struggling, they're really hurting, like it is a dark place. And just knowing that everyone else around you is also hurting and just you're going to be at the finish line soon and you don't want to get to that finish line thinking, oh, I could have done more. So just repeating it's going to be over soon really helps.
Yeah, definitely. And this one's a listener question. In terms of, maybe a younger athlete or someone looking to move up to the 5,000, what sort of advice would you give? You've got an incredible 16, 17, 5K from last year, you've run 5,000 at BUCS and stuff like that.
I think just kind of reviewing your sessions and what you're doing at the moment and just speaking with your coach and kind of just saying you want to move up to the 5,000 or the 5K, and just seeing what their advice is and kind of how they would tailor your training. So yeah, I think just speaking to your coach definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And can you give us a random fact about yourself?
Yes. I broke my finger playing basketball before.
Ouch. So you switched to
Yeah.
running, a safer sport, or in your case, safer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Have you got a go-to post-race celebration?
I think not as much a celebration, but I think just kind of catching up with old friends. Like if you're at the national and stuff, you get to see people from all the other clubs. So it's quite nice to be able to speak to all your friends that maybe you haven't seen in a while. So yeah, just looking at the sociable side too.
Yeah, for sure. And what are your thoughts on running social media?
I think there can be positives and there can be negatives. I think, yeah, positive is definitely like talking about something like breads, and the importance of fueling. Yeah, but I think a negative can obviously be, I feel like this was more a few years ago, but promoting kind of a certain body image or endurance athletes say should look a certain way. But I don't think that's as much the case now, which is really good to see.
Yeah, definitely has been something and still is to some extent, but improving a bit. Would you say then that at some point you found that challenging?
I think there was definitely a time where I kind of realized I was spending more time looking at these things. And then I kind of just managed to snap myself out of it by thinking, hey, these people aren't me. They're not doing the same things as me. Like realistically, I think just having the confidence that you know what you're doing is right and how you're fueling and how you're doing your sessions. So yeah, just not focusing too much on what other people are doing and not comparing.
Yeah, some really great advice there for anyone who is stuck in that hole at the moment. Okay,
Yeah.
and final question. If you could only ever do one session, and that can be everything out of, even cross training and stuff, what would that session be?
I think it would be a track session actually. Maybe with like a 1200 at the start and then kind of dropping it down, a few eights, few sixes, and fours. Because although grass sessions are my favorite, I think track sessions for me are the most rewarding because when I'm getting told what the session is, I'm always thinking, oh, it's going to be so hard. And then just to finish it is always quite a nice feeling.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I have to say, a descending pyramid is definitely an elite type of training session.
Yeah, definitely.
Got any thoughts on the ascending ones though?
I don't like them as much.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. No, excellent choice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. You've got an incredible mindset for sure. It clearly shows through in you being able to, get some great results. So a lot for people to take from this one, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. I'm new to this, guys, and I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's fitter, faster, happier, to leave your questions, comments and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.